There were many international developments in this 19th century. Here are some of them. The Industrial Revolution in England was triggered by automatic spinning machines around 1780, which reached its peak in industrial development in the United States around 1830 to 1840s. The development of these machinery technologies quickly penetrated China, including the British warships that confiscated Hong Kong in 1838 for the free opium traffic into China in exchange for tea. After the invention of the tonometer, Johann Heinrich Scheibler, 1777–1837, recommended 440 Hz as the atone standard in 1834 and was approved by the Society of German Natural Scientists and Physicians in the same year, while the French standard since about 1860 used 435 Hz and was followed by many countries. Then, the Music Commission of the Italian government in 1885 announced that all musical instruments and orchestras should use a 440 Hz tuning fork. In the deterioration of Qing Dynasty, 1644 to 1912, there were two kinds of fundamental modes in Chinese opera and Chinese rap in the capital, Beijing. At the end of the third period of Chinese music, id est, 西皮, and 二黄, which formed 皮黄腔 or 皮黄 tune, with its special musical instrument, 京胡. Beijing opera then spread throughout the country and became the national opera, and foreigners called it Chinese opera. In the European Romantic era, 1820 to 1900, music developed to be so diverse that it was very difficult to map its general style. But basically, the classic era had provided broad and strong foundations, so it could be said that music in the Romantic era was still based on the forms and the use of basic emotions from the classic era. The Romantic era distinguished itself more in terms of timbre expansion, dynamics, tempo, tone range, glissando and harmonic developments. As discussed in some previous videos in this series, the pattern of the harmonization progression development of European music tended to get into more and more dissonance. There were new harmonization progression techniques emerging in this era, such as enharmonic modulation, 13th chord, coloristic chord succession, non-concentric tonality, augmented sixth chord, the non-ordinary dominant harmonic progression, attempt to blur rhythm and harmonic tonality, to the use of atonal, etc. Music in the Romantic era, in line with the times and social developments, emphasized individual expression which was rich in feelings on certain subjects, such as nationalism, romance, or ancient works, so that not a few music lovers could distinguish the musical style of each of the composers. In this era, program music was widespread for consumption by the middle class. There were also art songs for individuals to sing at home. The combination of musicians and poets was increasingly common. Regular customers at concert halls had become common. Conservatories of music opened everywhere to accommodate young people to become professional musicians. The London Philharmonic Society was founded in 1813. The Paris Société des Concerts du Conservatoire in 1828. The Vienna Philharmonische Konzerte and the New York Philharmonic in 1842. In addition, the music critic profession began to emerge. Niccolò Paganini, 1782–1840, as the greatest violin virtuoso in history, was able to reach 3 octaves on 4 strings, and pluck with his left hand. His ability inspired many famous musicians and composers, such as Robert Schumann, 1810–1856, Franz Liszt, 1811–1886, and Johannes Brahms, 1833–1897. Aside of composing music as well, primarily for violin, Paganini was also known as a guitar virtuoso with his compositions for guitar music exceeding 200 songs. The compositions of Hector Berlioz, 1803–1869, especially the orchestras, were phenomenal and a tremendous breakthrough. His program music Symphonie Fantastique, 1830, which was an expression of his love for the acclaimed actress Harriet Smithson, 1800 to 1854, was so phenomenal that Hector Berlioz succeeded in marrying Harriet Smithson. Franz Liszt was inspired by Niccolò Paganini's ability in playing violin, and determined to close himself for 3 years to become the Paganini of the piano. To demonstrate his piano skills, he composed Transcendental Etudes, 1837, which was revised in 1852. When he played Hector Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique, the result was more overwhelming. Liszt's work on the piano was bombastic. His operas and symphonies were possible only to be played on a piano by 2 people. Wilhelm Richard Wagner, 1813 to 1883, was crowned as King of Opera. Within 25 years, 1848 to 1874, he composed the Der Ring des Nibelungen opera. He demanded details and perfection. He moved the focus of opera from vocal to highly dynamic and powerful symphonies. Wagner's music style became a trendsetter for musicians in the 20th century, such as the use of the atonal mode in Tristan and Isolde, 1857 to 1859. He also invented the Wagner tuba. His art philosophy influenced very much in the art world of his time, including outside the music world. And there were still many great and well-known composers with their own individual characteristics which will not be completely listed. Some of them were Franz Schubert, 1797 to 1828, Felix Mendelssohn, 1809 to 1847, Frédéric Chopin, 1810 to 1849, Giuseppe Verdi, 1813 to 1901, Georges Bizet, 1838 to 1875, Antonin Dvorak, 1841 to 1904, Giacomo Puccini, 1858 to 1924, Gustav Mahler, 1860 to 1911, and Richard Georg Strauss, 1864 to 1949. Before, the famous composers in the European music world were dominated from Western Europe with a tendency of uniformity in form, harmonization as well as melody, etc., all across the European countries. As stated in the previous video 3.b in this series. In contrast to Chinese music, the harmonization of European music developed into more and more dissonant that after using all tones in the scale into 13th chord. Richard Wagner developed further dissonant of atonal mode in his Tristan and Isolde. On the other hand, Chinese music developed in regional styles and specific timbre. Roughly, the northern melodic patterns tended to develop into high and mighty pitches with large and fast glissando, and the southern melodic patterns tended to develop into smooth and fluent. Each of these 2 regional musics were further detailed by ways of the music playing was manipulated. I have mentioned this also in brief in the video 3.b in this series. And the next video in this series will elaborate more on some samples of those regional music characteristics. In Europe, with the dominance of Napoleon Bonaparte, 1769 to 1821, on the continent, a sense of nationalism in the European nations began to rise, and this nationalism awareness gave birth to a new style of the music too. Since 1800, Russian composers came up with local styles. Mikhail Glinka, 1804 to 1857, was known as the father of Russian music with his most famous work Life for the Tsar, 1836. The Russian Five consisted of Alexander Borodin, 1833 to 1887, César Cui, 1835 to 1918, Miley Balakirov, 1837 to 1910, Modest Mussorgsky, 1839 to 1881, and Nikolai Andreevich Rimsky-Korsakov, 1844 to 1908. Perhaps the greatest Russian composer was Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky, 1840 to 1893, who composed the ballet Swan Lake, 1877, Overture 1812, 1880, the music program Romeo and Juliet, the 10th of September 1880, the ballet The Nutcracker, 1892, and the Pathétique Symphony, August 1893, which I am sure they are already familiar to you. Outside Russia, Bedřich Smetana, 1824–1894, composed the well-known music program, the Moldau, 1874, using Czechoslovak Republic regional characteristics. His 6 symphonic poems Ma Vlast, 1847–1879, became icons of the Czechoslovak Republic. Jean Sibelius, 1865–1957, was recognized as the greatest composer in his country, Finland, for his music which developed their independence revolution national identity from Russian colonialism. So his picture was put on the Finnish mark 100 banknotes until Euro banknote replaced it in 2002. Since 2011, Finland celebrates his birthday as Flag Flying Day or the Day of Finnish Music. In 2015, Finland held various events and concerts centered in Helsinki to commemorate his 150th birthday. That's all for now, and thank you for watching.